There was some news in the paper today about a couple of senators from Kansas who have succeeded, I think, in protecting you all from evildoers who will not be put into Leavenworth, which apparently you can just wander out of if you choose. And I think it's worth paying attention to what's going on here, right? Because a big reason why our government tortured people was not just to get information out of them, which of course it didn't, and was not just to be sadistic, it was not just foolishly thinking they could accomplish something, it wasn't just to scare Iraqis and other wrong peoples and evildoers. It was to convince Americans that there are subhuman, dark-skinned, foreign, Muslim, Arab devils who can't be talked to, who have to be treated like animals. And it successfully convinced, I think, a couple of senators from Kansas of that, because they are horrified of these evildoers. And in that process, of course, we've had to strip away all kinds of human rights and constitutional rights from those people and the rest of us in the process. And we haven't paid enough attention to how that's worked and how that is ongoing and how that has to be fought in every way, and how we have to demand not that these people be incarcerated in Kansas for life without trial, but that they be put on trial or free, as we all would demand to be. There was also some good news in the national papers today, and something our current president did that I approved of. For many of you, this may be an everyday thing. This is new for me. He announced that we are not going to have so-called missile defense bases in the Czech Republic and Poland. This is good news, right? He did not announce why. And there are probably several reasons why. But one of the reasons why is even better news. And it is that the people of the Czech Republic, a handful of young people in the Czech Republic who've come over here and educated us and gone around the world and organized this, went around their country and organized. They got cities to pass resolutions. They got 130 mayors from Czech Republic cities and took them to the capital and lobbied. They went on hunger strikes. They won a vote. They overthrew a government. They said no. They got their government to say no. The Czech Republic told the United States that base is not going in our country. They don't tell us when that's part of the story. Yeah, Russia didn't like it. Of course Russia didn't like it. It was an aggressive gesture towards Russia. But you couldn't say that up until today. Every single story was supposed to say this has nothing to do with Russia. This is to defend Europe from the Iranians and the Koreans and the Martians and the whatever you call the people on Venus and Jupiter. Right? We couldn't say Russia. Right? But now, the minute that we say, well, we're not going to do that, and we don't explain why, but we're not going to do that, well, this is giving in. Russia wins. We're caving into Russia. You know, God forbid we should do something that Russia approves of. You know, so I bring this up primarily because a lot of people, before they get active and work for social change, have to think they can succeed. Have to be told stories of success, have to see light at the end of the tunnel, have to imagine we're about to win, and then they'll get involved and work to win, right? It's completely backwards, right? We ought to do the most work when things are the gloomiest, right? We ought to have the same moral duty to get out there and work our butts off for justice when justice looks closest to impossible. But that's not how it works. For most people, they have to have hope. They have to have signs of success, examples of success, measures of progress. And so I think it's worth noting that the people in the Czech Republic did what Barack Obama told them to do, and he got out there and made him do it. Right? He quotes Franklin Roosevelt. He says, get out there and make me do it. The people of the Czech Republic are out ahead of us. They got out there and made him do it. The people in Kansas City are getting out there and working and have at least contributed thus far, at least to delaying the move and expansion of this weapons plant. Every victory along that path has to be celebrated and advertised because more people are going to join in for the next one. couple days ago, the Army announced that the U.S. Army announced that it would probably be shutting down what's essentially a weapons amusement video arcade in a shopping mall outside of Philadelphia, and not opening additional ones in additional shopping malls to teach young children that it's fun to play with weapons of death and simulate killing and dying. And there have been endless protests and endless bad media and attention brought to this Army Experience Center by people willing to risk arrest and go to jail, and people who more than once have gone to jail to close this place down. Well, the Army put out a statement that said, you know, we're probably going to shut this one down. We're not going to open any more. You know why? Because the economy's tanked and recruitment's up and we don't need it anymore. And peace activists forwarded me this with a straight face, as if this was the story of what had happened. The same Army that is spending tens of millions of dollars on advertising for recruitment, the same U.S. Army that will never be satisfied with recruitment, which is struggling every day to recruit people despite the economy. No, this is a victory, and they won't announce our victories for us. They won't tell us that we prevented an attack on Iran by exposing the lies on Iraq. They won't tell us that we've hurt recruitment. They won't tell us that we made the Iraq war illegal. They won't announce our victories for us. They won't tell us that there was pressure on Bush not to pardon the people that Cheney wanted pardoned, and he didn't do it. So we have to seek out these victories, inform each other of them, and celebrate them so that people get an idea. Because a lot of what I'm about to talk about sounds horrible and gloomy and despairing, but it doesn't have to be. We have to know it has to be changed and know that we can go out and change it. And there are endless examples of how we're doing it. Today is Constitution Day. 222 years ago today, 39 guys signed a piece of paper that created the Constitution. So the President has committed today, for one day, to issuing no signing statements, no new preventive detention policies, launching no new wars, not going to reauthorize the Patriot Act today, he's going to put it off, not going to prosecute bad apples today, going to put that off. We're not going to have any laws created on this day with executive orders or with secret memos by lawyers. We're not going to have warrantless spying for one day. We're not going to have unnecessary secrets kept today. We're not going to have the powers of torture and rendition maintained and cemented in place today. We're not going to adhere to any unconstitutional treaties not ratified by the Senate today. We're not going to employ mercenaries. We're going to give them the day off. We're not going to have war propagandists working for the government today. We're going to federalize the Federal Reserve today. Right? Imagine if, not just for a day, but for every day, every year, we actually paid attention to what the Constitution says. Right? I mean, it has to be radically updated, but even what's in it, if we paid any attention, we would have a radically different government. Because what has happened over the past 8 years is that the thing has been completely shredded. And the amendments, with every amendment that gives us any sort of rights, has been radically ripped apart in the past 8 years, with the exception, I think, of the Third Amendment. You know what the Third Amendment is? We don't have to put soldiers up in our homes because we build homes for them across the planet. Every other amendment has been shredded. Habeas corpus is gone. And the way this has worked, take the example of habeas corpus. Bush and Cheney simply began behaving as if there's no habeas corpus, no right to confront your accuser, to have a fair trial, to have a speedy trial, to have a counsel, and so forth. It's just gone. The next administration comes in and formalizes it, creates, they're drafting in black and white a policy of so-called due process reviews for people that we're holding eternally with no trial, right? And so you have one administration come through and create this new use of signing statements, and you have a new administration come in and not undo them, and not reverse that policy, and begin issuing its own signing statements. Not as many, not as egregious, but in exactly the same manner, fixing in place that this is acceptable in a way that a single administration alone couldn't do. And so we have to undo all of the power that has gone to the White House, right? These powers to make laws with signing statements, executive orders, secret memos, the powers to make war, the powers to make treaties, and so forth. We have to undo this. And it's not being undone. It won't be undone by a president. It might be undone by a Congress if we force the Congress to do it. So we have a lot of laws that need to be repealed, laws that Congress passed over the past 8 years assisting the president in stripping its powers away. We have new laws that need to be passed. Fundamentally, we have laws that need to be enforced because we've now established that there are two classes of people, those under the law and those above the law, who make the laws. Right? So if this prosecution goes forward, because we force it to, they don't want it to go forward at all, but if it does, and only so far as they have laid out, it will be worse than nothing, right? Because we will be prosecuting those low-level torturers who strayed from the illegal policies, not those who made the policies. Meaning that henceforth the president could tell a lawyer to write down that carjacking, rape, murder, whatever, is now legal, and it is. It is. Any crime is now legal if you have a secret memo from your lawyer saying it was legal. Unless we change this. Instead, we're fixing it in place. We're cementing this as acceptable by the way we're laying out this potential prosecution. We have to have Congress take back powers through impeachment and through subpoenas. If Congress does not reclaim the power of impeachment or the power of subpoena, it has no other powers. It becomes a bunch of court jesters. It becomes sort of a formal organization for passing laws that it asks the president to write, and then he can obey them or not as he chooses. And you have a chief author of these torture memos serving as an appeals court judge in the Ninth Circuit, Jay Bybee. He can and must be impeached. If he can't be impeached for putting down in black and white that aggressive war is henceforth legal and warrantless spying and torture and so forth are henceforth illegal because I say so, then who can be, right? And if Congress will not enforce its own subpoenas, Congress will have no power of oversight. And this is the situation we're in. Who knows what institution Congress can use to enforce its subpoenas? Yes, yes. The Capitol Police, our friends who lock us up when we speak out of line. We're going to take thousands of questions. They are at the beck and call of any committee on either side of the Hill to go and lock anyone up at any time, to literally hold them in contempt until they testify to the satisfaction of the Congress. Not show up and say, I do not recall, sir, I do not recall, sir. Until that power is reclaimed, Congress will have no power. And of course, Congress doesn't want to have any power, but we want Congress to have power because we want them to represent us through that power. We have to have rules changed. Rules that have been developed in the past 8 years and rules that are long-standing. The filibuster rule is the single greatest anti-democratic force in our country. If the senators of Kansas are going to protect us from the evildoers, will they not protect us from the filibuster? Will they not throw that out? This is a rule that allows senators representing 12% of Americans to block all legislation in the Senate and therefore all legislation in the House. Nothing could be more anti-democratic. I argue for eventually amending the Constitution to rid us of the Senate itself and put it out of its misery, but that's a complex step. Changing the filibuster can be done tomorrow. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in your Bible. It is a rule of the Senate, and the Senate can change it with 51 senators at any given moment. Give us the Employee Free Choice Act in the next hour and build a labor movement to give us progressive change in the coming year. And there's no excuse for not doing it. And by keeping that rule around, in case the Republicans get back in power, You guarantee that the Republicans will get back in power because you demonstrate an unwillingness to do anything with your power. Thomas Jefferson, whose house is next to mine in Virginia, was involved in putting this Constitution together 222 years ago. And yet, nonetheless, he had a very different attitude about it from most Americans, including Americans who've never read the thing. And he said, "Some men look at constitutions with sanctimonious reverence and deem them like the Ark of the Covenant, too sacred to be touched. They ascribe to the men of the preceding age a wisdom more than human and suppose what they did to be beyond amendment. Laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, and new discoveries are made, new truths disclosed, and manners and opinions change with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also and keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when a boy, as civilized society to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors." They thought we were going to impeach people every year. They thought we were going to amend the Constitution constantly. We barely tweaked it. It was cutting edge 230 years ago. It ain't cutting edge anymore. Other nations' constitutions are far out ahead of ours. International treaties on human rights are far out ahead of us, we being one of the few holdouts on signing and ratifying many such treaties. So we have to think in the long term of what we want our system of government to be. There are many changes we can make with rules changes and legislation. There are others where we need either a Supreme Court ruling or in some cases absolutely need a constitutional amendment. And we have to be willing to think about how we can get there and how we can do it, at least to have a coherent vision of what we're aiming for as we work incrementally for progress. It's interesting to me that 39 people signed the Constitution 222 years ago, because 39 is a very important number on Capitol Hill right now. Does anybody have any idea why? Yeah? No?
It takes 40 to uphold the filibuster.
Well, that's not what I was thinking of, but that is very much true. Not 39, but 40, which is very close to 39, is the number of, well, that's not even true, it's 41, which is still pretty close to 39. It takes 41 people, which can represent, at minimum, 12% of Americans to uphold any filibuster. And there's nothing romantic about it. They don't get up and give speeches or read the encyclopedia. They just say, I'm willing to filibuster, 41 of them, and it blocks all legislation. And it's not reserved for extremes, it's just used to block everything. Which means that you don't have majority rule in the Senate. You don't have 51 senators to do something, you have 60 senators to do something. Many of you, like myself, probably received upwards of 10,000 emails in recent years saying, give money to the Democratic Party until we have 60 senators and there will be peace, joy, and harmony in the land. And now they do, at least if they replace Kennedy, they do. And yet, they behave as if absolutely nothing has changed. So, that was not the answer I was looking for. The answer I was looking for was this one. In the House, if all of the Republicans vote no on a bill, for whatever crackpot reason they've got, it's gonna kill grandma or whatever, if 39 Democrats also vote against that bill, it dies. And most of these bills deserve to die. And back in June, we had a hell of a fight over the war supplemental bill, because you may recall it went through the House and 51 Democrats voted no just to look good and pretend they were for peace. And then it went to the Senate and they added in funding for the IMF and bailout for East European bankers. And it came back to the House and all the Republicans said we're voting no. So now you couldn't have 51 Democrats vote no. Now it actually meant something. So if 39 or more stood by their no votes, the bill died. It was blocked. End of story. You know, then they would split it up, do two separate bills, try harder, etc. Well, we fought. All of the peace groups worked very well together. We had a website called Fire Dog Lake, whipping these people online, keeping track of their promises and broken promises and lies. And we held 30. We didn't get 39. And yet, we made virtually the entire executive branch of the government and the Congress do almost nothing for upwards of a week but threaten and bribe and whip to get those votes. And they're still paying back the money, the promises, the press events, the threats that they made in that negotiation. We're now in a situation where we may have a health care bill that does not include, you know, what the rest of the civilized world has, much less a simple public option that would be a step in the right direction. It may have it, but it has to wait 5 years after the bill begins, some years from now, and once the lobbyists have taken care of it and we've all forgotten about it, or we'll do it through this private co-op so we make sure the insurance companies control it anyway. It may be not just a lousy bill, but a lousy bill without even the token good measure that Congress members have committed to voting against any bill that lacks it. And so the key number again becomes 39, because all of the Republicans will vote no. If you can find 39 Democrats to vote no, and you have twice that number who've already promised to vote no, assuming it doesn't become a better bill than what it looks like it's going to become, then it stops, and we get to start over and demand something better. Which is not to say we don't want something better immediately, but it's by telling these people that we're going to hold them to their promises, we're going to reward them or we're going to punish them, depending on what they do, that we have a chance at making it better in the near term and in the long term. So there are a lot of things I think that we need to keep in the Constitution that we've lost, right? Habeas corpus, the Bill of Rights, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of speech and assembly, protection from warrantless search, rights of due process, protection from cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, this was in the Bill of Rights, cruel and unusual punishment. We have to get all of these things back, and we can talk about how we've lost each of them or radically diminished each of them. I think we also need to lose some things that are there. We need to lose the Electoral College. We need, I think, to lose the United States Senate, which does nobody any good, has never done anybody any good, has always been further from public opinion than the House, does not represent small states who would otherwise be disenfranchised. The people in small states line up in their opinions more with the House than the Senate, just like the people in large states. It is the Senate that strips state governments of power. It is Max Baucus's health insurance company written bill that says there shall be no health care regulation at the state level. It's not the House bill that says that. And frankly, small states are small for a reason. We are a very mobile society. People move to better states. I'm sorry. If you're going to have the same number of people representing Wyoming as represent California, you're not going to have a pretense of democracy, right? And you could tweak it and you could adjust it and get more in line with population, but we've already got that perfectly in the House, and the House needs to be enlarged. Nobody can represent 700,000 people. The Senate needs to be removed because it doesn't do us any good. It was meant to be anti-democratic. It is anti-democratic. You look at the stories in the media in recent days on the health care bill, right? You've had a situation where enough members of the House have said we will not vote for a bill without the public option, that the House simply can't pass a bill without the public option. And you've had senators say, we're not going to vote for a public option. Across the board, universally, every media outlet I've heard have said these progressives, these House members, these activists who want a public option can't do math. They simply can't do math. They haven't looked at the Senate, which is the gospel truth and a law of physics. And the Senate says you can't pass a bill with the public option. Well, you could have done the exact opposite story and said these senators can't do math. They haven't looked at the House, right? But it's never that way. It's always the Senate that can do math. It's always the House that can't do math. It's always the Senate that's serious and the House that's not serious. So if you want to know which side the Senate is on, it's on the same side as the corporate media. That should be enough for you. We need to lose the idea that corporations have human rights. It's not in the Constitution, but we have to get it out of it. We have to lose the idea that money is speech. We have to lose the idea that automatic weapons are part of the Second Amendment. We have to limit the incredible power of the Supreme Court. We have to require a balanced budget. And we can talk about that. That may be controversial with some people, I hope, if you're thoughtful about it. We have to figure out a way to involve people more in a citizens branch, in legislating by initiative, in making public opinion count for something. And there are a lot of ways to do it and experiments in doing it that I look at in the book. I think we have to add rights, right? And people, you know, when they first wrote the Bill of Rights, they acted as if, you know, these were the rights that God gave us and they discovered them, you know. It's just absolute nonsense. These are the rights they chose to invent, just as we've invented rights for corporations. And there are other countries now that have invented rights for the environment. Not environmental rights for us, but rights for the environment. And we can invent whatever kind of rights we want. And I think we need a right to vote. Not just the right not to have voter discrimination against certain groups of people, but the right to vote. Right? So that we get registered to vote the day we turn 18 automatically, like you get Social Security. And we don't do this busy work, and that's what it is, that we think of as activism, called registering people to vote. We just are registered to vote, and we have a universal national system of elections where we have verifiable elections, where it's put down on paper, counted publicly before a variety of witnesses, locally at every polling place, and there's no question who got the most votes in any election. I think we need to expand the Magna Carta type protections, not be rid of them. We need the presumption of innocence. We need the right to have and to use videos of all interrogations and confessions. We have that technology. We ought to have the use of it. We need equal rights for women, for every group of people. We need rights for children. We need rights for family leave. We could even talk about family values as what we need. We need rights for the environment. We need workplace rights. We need the Employee Free Choice Act. We need, I would argue, basic welfare. There's absolutely no excuse for anyone to be hungry in this country, right? We can do it with a maximum wage pegged to the minimum wage. We can do it with a basic income guarantee. There are ways to do it discussed in the book, but we need basic human welfare. We need the right to conscientious objection. We need the right to know what our rights are and to have them applied to everyone equally. And there are all kinds of treaties we can sign to simply do that with the rest of the world in cooperation. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. Beyond which we have to enforce our laws, or there's no point in perfecting them. Couple more points, and then I'll take any questions you've got. Number one, looking only forward leads only to disaster. Absolute disaster and nothing else. If you're in a science fiction movie with Tom Cruise and you can see crimes in the future, then you can prosecute crimes looking forward. Otherwise, the only way you can prosecute crimes is looking backward, because I'm sorry to reveal this secret information, but every single crime ever committed is in the past. And if we do not prosecute them, we don't deter them, which is why torture is ongoing and will be ongoing as long as it's understood that it won't be punished. You cannot enrage the right-wing minority crazies any more than they are enraged. It cannot be done. You could have come out on day one and said, we are going to prosecute all of the departing criminals, we're going to throw out the filibuster, we're going to pass the Employee Free Choice Act, we're going to demand single-payer health care, and what would they have done? They would have started bringing guns to rallies, they would have called you a socialist, they would have claimed you were born in Africa. Exactly the same things that they do when you give them 90% of what they want. That doesn't appease them. When they demand that you fire White House staff and you do it, that doesn't make them like you. They're not going to say you're a good guy now.
Yeah.
They're going to give you a list of the next people they want fired, right? So this enraging the right is not an argument against any sort of action on behalf of the majority of the public. We are destroying international relations. We can't tell other governments not to abuse human rights. The nation of Spain is likely to start prosecuting Americans because we won't. And you know, not just torture, but all other crimes. We have to prosecute them ourselves. The first 60% of the Constitution and virtually all of the important things in the Constitution is devoted to what institution? The Congress. Article 1, the Congress. All of the powers are given to the Congress. They wanted a very weak executive to execute the will of the Congress. Now Congress asks the executive what it should do, complains that he won't write their bills for them, complains that he won't order them, tell them what to do so that they don't have to decide, so that they can simply obey. It's an absolute reversal of what was supposed to happen. Well, there are a lot of problems, but that's a big one, I think. The current president, I'm sorry to say, if he could tell Congress what to do, would not tell them to do anything very good. But if he would, that would be a matter of luck. It wouldn't be something we were controlling. It's very hard for us to control a president. He's not up for 4 years. He's taken a dozen times the money of any senator. We can't even control senators. He's a focus of the corporate media day in and day out, the most corrupting force on earth. You try to go talk to him, there's a thing called the Secret Service. He can ignore entire regions of the country, not just you and your friends, and still get reelected. Right? It's not this particular president. You can love him or hate him. Most people do, because he's either in the party you're supposed to love or the party you're supposed to hate. But every president is very, very hard to control, a president. But a member of the House of Representatives, it's out of control, 700,000 people, but it's very, very doable. A handful of people can get at them and influence them. You can find out where they'll be and get in their face, which is extremely powerful to just have a conversation with them face to face. If you're demanding commitments, yes or no, accountable commitments to things. You can take them on in the local media. You can take them on in primary elections. You can make their lives very, very difficult by disrupting their workday. You can't do that with a president, and you know, if you could, what good would it do us? We get another president who reverses everything. You have to get power back in the Congress, as we've discussed, and you have to start, even now with the corrupt system we've got, putting our energies into controlling those Congress members. So I disagree with those who want more leadership from the president. I don't. You know, I think him letting Congress write bills is actually appropriate. There was a poll today, there were polls everywhere today, because it was Constitution Day, asking students what they knew, you know, who was the first president, how many states are there, and so forth. Incredibly depressing stuff, right, because you get 10–20% of students who know things that you would have thought everybody knew. I looked in particular at one from Oklahoma City, not to pick on them, I think it was probably typical, but I'm going there tomorrow, and it was sort of the lead in all these stories. What's the supreme law of the land? This is students in Oklahoma City. 28% got it right. Presumably the Constitution was the answer, I don't know. The Constitution uses that phrase to describe treaties. So, what do we call the first 10 amendments? 26% got that right. Presumably that's the Bill of Rights. But when they asked, what are the two parties? What are the two parties? They got over twice as good a response as anything else. They got 43, almost twice as good a response as anything else. They have 43% of students could name the two parties. But what does this say about the people doing the test? Because what is not so much as mentioned in the Constitution?
Two
Parties. Parties. They're not mentioned in the thing. They didn't want them. They didn't like them. They were afraid of them. They now dominate our system of government. So that a Congress member's loyalty is not to the Congress, it is to a party. Right? And for roughly half of the Congress in any given moment, it is therefore to the president. Incredible corrupting force. A lot of it through money. So you clean up the money, you clean up some of the party power too. But I argue also against those who say we need better party discipline. Right? If you had perfect party discipline in the Democratic Party, as you sometimes do in the Republican, though not always, maybe you could push through a halfway healthcare reform. You would have absolutely zero opposition to wars. You would have absolutely zero voice for the majority of Americans' opinion on almost any issue. because the leadership of the Democratic Party takes a contrary position. Not as bad as the Republican Party. If you can't think beyond those two things, yes, you're right, not as bad as the Republican Party. But would it not perhaps be a better solution to have Congress members accountable to their constituents instead of to the leader of any party? Might that not be a better ideal to work towards? I don't want to go on too long, but I think we need to demand that Congress take back some power. Kicking and screaming it won't want to, but we have to demand it. We have to demand that it use impeachment and not just, Article 2, Section 4, right? The President, the Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors involving sex. Right? It doesn't say that. And they just impeached a judge from Texas for groping employees. Right? We're impeaching governors across the country for sex affairs. We impeached a president for sex. It doesn't say that. And unless you're willing to impeach a guy who put down in black and white in secret memos for the head of his crime family, who happened to be the President of the United States, aggressive wars are now legal if you want them. Up to the President alone. Warrantless spying, legal. Torture, legal. Who wrote custom-built torture memos for individuals. This gentleman can be tortured in these ways. Unless you can impeach that guy, who has a lifetime appointment on an appeals court, you can't impeach anybody. Right? So, or you can just impeach for sex, but that doesn't scare anyone if you just impeach for sex. That doesn't make anyone accountable. Senator Leahy, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, when these torture memos came out, said to Jay Bybee, Judge Jay Bybee, would it be too much trouble? Would you mind coming in and talking to us in the United States Senate Judiciary Committee? And Bybee said, essentially, go Cheney yourself. And Patrick Leahy said, yes, sir. And that was that. Because he's terrified of issuing a subpoena. And he's terrified of taking on a conservative judge and being accused in the media of attacking a conservative judge because he was conservative. Never mind the little detail that he legalized torture, right? And this is because they issued dozens of subpoenas during the last Congress that are just out there hanging, not reintroduced. Just let them go. It was all a charade. Because Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and the rest of them just said, no, I'm not going to comply. And they didn't make them because they didn't use the Capitol Police. They used the Justice Department, and they're still waiting, even on the new Justice Department. We also need to demand that Congress extend the statutes of limitations on all the relevant crimes of the past decade or so, because many of them are ticking out very rapidly. Couple more secrets to reveal, and then some announcements. Very well kept secret in Washington. You don't need a bill to end a war. You also don't need the United States Senate to end a war. The House of Representatives can put the damn checkbook away, and that's it. War's over. That's it, right? And we had 100 of them. Now we're down to 30, right? We're down to 30. Why? Because they're not Republican wars anymore. They're Democratic wars. Those are the good wars, right? But we have to work these people. And if we get another opportunity where we only need 39, I think we can get 39. The public is turning against these wars. We are turning the public against these wars, including Afghanistan. Stop, for God's sake, thinking it's a minority position. This is a majority position in America. We are against wars now. We have made this country against wars. We have done that, and it is now against wars. We have to just get that view represented by our elected officials. And we can, and we must. And we're coming up on the 8-year mark, beginning of October, 8 years in Afghanistan. Come to Washington on October 5th and join us in resistance. Come the previous weekend. That's a Monday. Come the previous weekend for conferences on war. Go to afterdowningstreet.org and come on the 5th. There are events in the following weeks all over the country, including here, in opposition to these wars. Be a part of that. Take that message to the media and to your Congress member. I'm going to Oklahoma City tomorrow, and then I'm going to Dallas, and we're going to have a debate. I'm going to debate a Republican of some sort on the question of whether Bush should be prosecuted for his crimes. We're going to be, I think, a mile from his house. And we're going to have protests, we're going to have rallies, we're going to have fundraisers, and we're going to have a debate in Dallas. If Dallas can do this stuff, everybody can do this stuff. Here in Kansas City, on the other hand, a guy named Andrew Card is coming to town. Anybody remember a guy named Andy Card? This is the guy in the summer of 2002 who said, well, you know, as far as marketing a new product, you don't come out with it in August. You wait till the fall. In fact, September, they began a major campaign push, a marketing cell. Andy Card oversaw a group in the White House called the White House Iraq Group, which was set up to market a war based on lies. And they did so beginning that September, 7 years ago. Andy Card is a war criminal. Andy Card is worthy of a citizen's arrest. He is coming on Tuesday, September 22nd, from 7:30 to 9 p.m., a place called Rockhurst, their convocation center. And there is no reason for people not to be there. As people were there today for a Karl Rove event, as people are there every day when these people show their faces in public to say, you're thinking of running for Senate? You got to be thinking of staying out of prison. Andy Card is a war criminal who led the effort to market a war based on lies, lying to Congress is a felony, misleading Congress is a felony. An aggressive war is the supreme international crime. Get some handcuffs, get some friends, get some posters, get some nerve, be there.